Welcome to Enchanted Astrology with Ariel Smith. Thank you for joining me as we explore the astrology for the week of July 8th to the 14th through story. Now this week we have Venus entering Virgo on July 9th, and she will then make some unharmonious aspects to Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto as she reaches 4 degrees of Virgo on July 13th. We also have a cazimi with Mercury retrograde conjunct the Sun at 20 degrees of Cancer on July 12th. And we have a new moon at 21 degrees 59 minutes of Cancer on July 14th at 3:43 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Now, this week, our story begins in an unusual place. Imagine you've spent your entire life listening to songs with lyrics. Every song told you exactly what it meant, exactly how you should feel, exactly what the story was about. And one evening, you walk into an old concert hall. The lights are dim, and an orchestra begins to play. But there are no words, no lyrics, just music. At first, maybe it's a little uncomfortable because your mind keeps searching for meaning. What is this song trying to tell me? But after a while, something changes because you stop trying to understand the music and you begin to feel it. And so you realize perhaps the song was never trying to tell you what it meant. Perhaps it was inviting you to discover what it means to you. Perhaps it was waiting for you to remember something that words could never explain. And that is the invitation of this week's Mercury retrograde cazimi with the new moon in Cancer. On July 12th, Mercury retrograde meets the Sun at 20 degrees of Cancer. A cazimi is one of astrology's most beautiful moments. Mercury is no longer overwhelmed by the light of the Sun. It is sitting at the very heart of it. It's as though our ordinary thinking mind is illuminated by something much deeper. And Mercury is also in retrograde, so this isn't information arriving from the outside world. This is wisdom that is emerging from within. And only 2 days later, on July 14th, we have a new moon at 21 degrees and 59 minutes of Cancer. Cancer speaks the language of feeling. It governs our emotional foundation, our roots, our ancestry, the place inside us that remembers who we are before the world told us who we should be. And together, this new moon and Mercury retrograde invite us to stop looking outside ourselves for the answers. Instead, they ask us to become quiet enough to hear the language of our own soul, not through words, through our feelings, because emotions are the language of the soul. And sometimes we spend so much of our lives explaining our feelings that we forget they were never meant actually to be explained. They were meant to be listened to. So this week is less about figuring life out and more about remembering what your heart has been trying to say all along. Now, as you leave this concert hall, you feel different. Nothing in the world has changed, yet everything looks new. It's as though you've been lifted high above your life, Like Aladdin and Jasmine on the magic carpet, the city below hasn't moved, but your perspective has. And you can suddenly see roads you couldn't see from the ground. You see patterns, connections, even possibilities. And this is the larger story unfolding right now with Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto all sitting together at 4 degrees of the fire and air signs, with Jupiter close behind at 3 degrees of Leo. 4 is a number of foundations. It represents stability. If you think of 4 legs on a table, building something that lasts. But these planets aren't practical planets. They're inviting us into something much bigger than our everyday, ordinary identity. Neptune in Aries asks us to know ourselves not just as a physical person, but as a spiritual being expressing itself through this lifetime. Uranus in Gemini is revolutionizing the mind itself. It loosens our old mental habits and opens entirely new ways of seeing reality. Pluto in Aquarius continues its deep work of transforming our collective evolution. And Jupiter in Leo expands our identity. It asks us to become larger than the stories we've been telling ourselves about who we are. And together, these planets create an extraordinary backdrop for this Cancer new moon, because as we listen inward, our foundation begins to shift. And that doesn't mean our life changes overnight, but now we begin building our life upon a deeper truth. And this time, it's not the truth of fear. It's not the truth of conditioning. It's the truth of our soul. Now, you leave with this beautiful new perspective. You feel connected, inspired, alive, and then you arrive home and you notice the garden. The flowers need watering, the weeds have grown, branches need pruning, some plants are thriving and others are struggling. Nothing about the garden is perfect. And suddenly you become frustrated. Why wasn't I seeing this before? Why is everything such a mess? This is Venus entering Virgo on July 9th. Venus is the principle of love, harmony, connection. It is the awareness that we are not separate from life. And Virgo is the sign of discernment. So it notices, it refines, it asks what serves life and what no longer does. So Virgo sees details that other signs may overlook, and that is a gift. But it also creates a challenge, because it's very easy to notice what isn't working and immediately decide that it's wrong. It's easy to fall into a mindset of judgment, which implies right and wrong. But love does not judge. Love is a state of unconditional acceptance. And this is one reason where Venus is considered in fall in Virgo, because it is asking something very challenging, which is to discern and notice what is imperfect, what is not working, but respond and tend to that from a state of love and with care. So Venus naturally accepts and Virgo naturally evaluates. Venus says, I love. And Virgo says, how can this be improved? So neither one is wrong, but together they create a tension. And that tension is where Venus learns about love under challenging circumstances. So it's easy to love when we have our rose-colored glasses on. It's easy to love when you see the good in everything, which, for example, Pisces does. And Venus is exalted in Pisces because she gets the support she needs there. But it's a lot harder to stay in a state of love when someone is being unkind, or when you don't see through the rose-colored glasses, when you notice very clearly what is and isn't working. And so it is so easy to fall into judgment and criticism. But Venus in Virgo is learning about how to love when the conditions aren't ideal, when the reality falls short of the dream. Venus in Virgo is learning about responding with love and care when it is so much easier to respond with criticism and judgment. It takes a certain level of humility and strength to be able to do this. So as Venus moves through Virgo, she makes challenging aspects to Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto on July 13th, the very planets inviting us to expand beyond our ordinary identity, and they now meet the parts of us that want to organize, fix, and perfect. So you look at the garden again, and this time you notice someone kneeling quietly beside the flowers. It's a gardener, and he isn't angry with the weeds. He does not shame the dying plants. He doesn't call the garden a failure. He simply kneels. One handful of soil, one flower, one weed, one branch, patiently, lovingly. And you ask him, "Don't the weeds bother you?" And he smiles and says, "They're simply showing me where love is needed." And that sentence changes everything. Because love doesn't ignore what needs tending. Love tends it. And that is the higher expression of Venus in Virgo. Notice what isn't working without stepping out of love. Discern without judging. Care without condemning. Because the moment we judge, we separate ourselves. And Venus reminds us that love is always a movement toward connection. So the challenge of Venus in Virgo isn't learning to see imperfections. It already sees them. The challenge is remaining open-hearted while seeing them. I often think of planets in fall as learning under more difficult conditions. It's like learning to swim in rough ocean water instead of in a calm pool. If you eventually learn to swim there, you've developed strengths that calm water never demanded of you. So Venus in Virgo learns love under imperfect conditions. People disappoint. Relationships require maintenance. Plans fall apart. The lesson is not to pretend that everything is perfect. The lesson is to discover whether love can survive reality. And that is the mastery of Venus in Virgo. So as we awaken to more of who we truly are, we'll naturally begin seeing what no longer aligns with that truth. We will see old habits, old fears, old relationships we have with ourselves. We'll even see the collective systems that no longer serve life. And the invitation is not to become cynical over that, nor is it to wait for someone else to come and fix the world. Virgo reminds us that service begins with what is in within reach. your choices, your words, your home, your body, your relationships, the garden directly in front of you. And every loving choice becomes a seed. Every conscious action becomes an offering. Every act of integrity quietly demonstrates to others another way of living. So you don't change the world by condemning the weeds. You change the world by growing a healthier garden. And gardens have a beautiful way of inspiring other gardens. Now, this week's Yin Yoga practice is inspired by the Cancer new moon, inviting you to slow down, become still, and listen deeply to your soul. Beyond words, your emotions carry a wisdom all their own. So together we'll create a space to hear what they have been quietly trying to tell you. And if you'd like to work more deeply with this new moon energy, you can find the practice in the yoga studio at enchantedAstrology.ca. So this week asks us to remember who we are beneath the noise, to remember that our emotions are not interruptions, they are invitations. To remember that as our consciousness expands, we will inevitably notice what no longer belongs. And finally, to remember that seeing clearly is not the same as judging harshly. The soul doesn't awaken so it can criticize the world. It awakens so it can love the world more deeply. So may this Cancer new moon reconnect you with the quiet voice beneath all the noise. May Venus in Virgo teach you that care is one of love's highest expressions. And may you leave this week tending your own garden with patience, compassion, and the quiet knowing that every small act of love helps to build the foundation for the life your soul has been remembering all along. Thank you for joining me for this week's Enchanted Astrology. I will see you next Wednesday with another episode.